BOOYAKASHA! My name is Aryan Salimi, and you are currently listening to Bass Tunes on KUCI 88.9 FM in Irvine. You might have heard it if you heard that little intro, the man getting dressed up, becoming the boss master, the real West Staines massive leader of the youth. You might know that we's talking about the Ali G show, baby. I am super duper excited to talk about this show and everything that came out because of it. It is so good to be back. I had to take last week off because I got sick. Yes, you heard it right. 3 years onward. I thought I was safe. No, I got the Rona. It was pretty bad, but I'm good now, right? I recovered. I'm all good. We ain't positive no more. And, my family and I are good, so we're all set. But unfortunately, I did have to delay this episode a week, the birthday special, which is going to come up. And you were going to have to hear the same interview that I've done. This is the third time I played it on air, and I didn't mean to do that, but listen, you need to hear my crispy interview with the boy Madrone, Morris Madrone, and I hope that with every single time y'all heard that on air, that you enjoyed it, because as I said a lot, I definitely enjoyed doing that one. Give me a second. You know what? I'm in trouble with the audio right now. The headphones. A lot of static on the air right now. But not on this station because you're listening to KUCI. As I said, we're currently at a certain wattage that I'll tell y'all later. Let's get into it, shall we? Before then, I'd like to say that I'm, again, the other part of the reason that I didn't want to talk, I want to talk about this last week was because, hey, Friday was the day before my birthday, so, I don't need y'all to show me late love or nothing like that, but it was the greatest 20th birthday of all time. I got to sit in my house. Actually, I stood out and I listened to the garden far away from everybody. So I saw the garden show in the observatory and JPEG with my lovely partner and her friend, and it was great, right? It was awesome. Shout out to you. Shout out to your friend. Shout out to that. Happy birthday to her, right? It was a good show. I enjoyed it very much so. Although they didn't really like JPEG that much, and honestly, I felt pretty sad about that because I like JPEG Mafia, but a lot of the crowd just wasn't really feeling it, You didn't see that many. I didn't think you saw anybody in Peggy shirts or nothing like that. They're all there for the garden, you feel me? And obviously, pretty big band, right? I guess they've gotten a lot bigger in recent years. I thought they're cool. I don't think you'll be seeing them on the Bass Tunes program anytime soon, although they're cool. I don't think I have the skills to get them on, and I don't know if that'd be good for the station anyways. Ooh. Hold on 1 second. Let's go ahead and play something real quick. Back to what Georgia was playing. Well, I'm going to keep talking. Sorry about that. Let's continue with the show. All right. Satirical comedy series aired on Channel 4 in the United Kingdom and HBO in the United States from 2000 to 2004. All right. Shows created by and starred Sacha Baron Cohen as 3 characters. The titular Ali G, a man who acts like he is from the streets in impoverished condition despite growing up in a middle-class town called Staines. He sort of dresses, talks, and acts like British and American rap culture, sort of mixing the two in. And other characters. Foreign importer from Kazakhstan, born and learns about Western culture and traditions with an awkward, sometimes xenophobic, but overall kind demeanor. He's the one who sort of garners the most sympathy from the most regular small-town people. The rest of the 2 characters, the other 2 ones, sort of interview bigger people in politics and other forms of the other industries, right? And the gay fashion reporter from Austria, Bruno, who sort of pokes fun at the fashion industry and homophobia in his interviews. So we're going to focus on each character distinctly, as each of them have unique segments and have their own movie based on them. Before we do that, let's quickly talk about Sacha himself and how the character of Ali G came to life. Sacha Baron Cohen is a Jewish comedian who was born and raised in the United Kingdom. In contrast to his somewhat, dumb characters, Cohen is shy, intelligent, and well-spoken, proper British accent, having gone to prestigious schools for the primary education and getting a degree from Cambridge history in 1993, specifically focusing on anti-Semitism, which does play into his Borat character, as he is notoriously very much that. Before this show, he hosted a few broadcast shows in British television before training to become a clown in Paris, which I thought was surprising. Again, a pretty prestigious clown school. I sometimes forget that clowning as a sort of thing is a real thing, right? And afterwards, the first character he would create was actually Bruno. I thought Ali G was the first one. Nope, it was Bruno in a more, shall we say, primordial form. And he appeared in short sketches in between shows on the Paramount Comedy Channel in 1998. But before that, let's get to Ali G, shall we? Where this character first appeared was not actually on his own television show. In fact, it was on the 11 O'Clock Show, a sort of late-night satirical comedy series on Channel 4 in 1998. Channel 4, as you Americans don't know, is a British television station, right? Before that, of course, in the UK, when television first sort of came out, it was the BBC. And then BBC 2, and then Channel 3 ended up being, I believe ITV was the first independent commercial broadcasting station in the United Kingdom. You know, it was back in the day, there were only 2 channels. And those 2 channels, of course, were government run, unlike the United States, where it was sort of a mix of corporate and, you know, you have stuff like the PBS and NPR in America, but not really as much. And then Channel 4 came out as sort of the, I don't know, most public-facing one. I'm not sure. All I remember about Channel 4, of course, I've never seen it. I mean, I've been to the UK, of course, but I've never seen it on TV. I didn't really watch TV when I was there. Was I think they broadcast The Simpsons a lot. But other than that, Ali would have his own sketches on the show, sort of being called the voice of the youth in his funny accent, where he would interview notable figures in character. And it's interesting watching this because it's a much more subdued character. It's a much more basic version. He doesn't really get to all the flashy gear. He doesn't have the outlandish outfits and chains nearly as much. You see him without his trademark goggles because obviously if you know the character, you know his, shall we say, flamboyant attire, the yellow or red tracksuit, Tommy Sport, the cap, the goggles, the chains, all that stuff, right? So he didn't really get there. But after the 11 O'Clock Show, he ended up getting his own show on Channel 4 for 2 years, and it became a pretty big hit. So much so that after those 2 seasons, he had to move because he became such a notable character. And after the movie, because if you guys knew the show but didn't know the movie, yes, there was a movie that aired in the United Kingdom, and I don't really think got an American release, and it was a pretty small budget and small success affair, but, you know, it was there. We'll talk about it in a little bit. After that, he got too big for the United Kingdom, so he had to move on to the United States to continue the show. So a lot of the clips that you might have seen on the internet mostly come from the HBO run, where 2 seasons of 6 episodes got aired. And I think HBO was a pretty good fit, but they only ordered 6 episodes, and from reading articles and things like that, it got a sort of mixed, but a lot of positive reception, especially in retrospect, but it apparently didn't do super well in the United States, which I wasn't a fan of. But obviously, you know, you go on the internet, the clips are plentiful on the internet, so they do have some sort of long-lasting appeal. The main draw, the whole point of the show is this, right? You have this utter buffoon, this idiotic character, not only in the accent, which I don't even know if it's idiotic or not, but the man doesn't know a lot of basic grasps, doesn't have a lot of a basic grasp of the English language, mixes up words together a lot, different meanings, and is so focused on the hip-hop culture, hanging out with his posse and Stains, and sort of posturing a lot for a man, at least character-wise, who had a pretty decent middle-class upbringing in a regular, albeit maybe boring town in the United Kingdom, right? And it's all these very important figures and important topics being discussed under the guise of a show to appeal to the young demographic. And it's mostly just older people being interviewed with him. And we have a lot of big interviewees, right? Noam Chomsky, Buzz Aldrin, Newt Gingrich, Boutros Ghali, David Beckham, even Donald Trump, for the presidency, of course, when he was just a businessman. He proposes a ice cream glove business, and somehow he's one of the few people to immediately get the joke and rock out of the show.
Well, my idea is to come out with just like these ice cream gloves that make the ice cream not go on your hands and make it all well sticky.
Okay.
Is you going to be in on that?
Well, it sounds like an interesting...
We've got like P. Diddy is going to be in it.
Good.
So that's interesting, right? episodes would generally center on one sort of topic, like respect or war or things like that, and would be sort of expanded upon through interviews and sometimes other segments, but that mostly was with the Channel 4 show, which I'll sort of delve into the differences of that once I'm done with this. Sort of a mix of a sketch and prank show. It's like a hidden camera prank show and a sketch comedy, and each interviewee is sort of tricked into doing the interview, right? I'm sure the vast majority of people watching this show, or going on to do the interview, if they knew that they were just going on to sort of, get goofed on by a smarmy comedian playing an idiot, they probably wouldn't do it, especially these former high-ranking figures in politics and science industry, these big figures, right? And when you go and sit down and do the interview, aside from just the outlandishness of it, sometimes as well they have these round tables with a bunch of different people, get a bunch of religious figures together, like I think a pastor, a rabbi, some university professor, and an atheist activist, all put together in this round table in this sort of interview room made to look like a street. You have like a chain link fence and graffiti on the walls with these nice couches. It's a odd feel, but it works. I think it would actually look pretty good in a standard sort of talk show thing. But he ends up just asking people nonsensical questions that sort of loosely relate to the topic of interest. And he often mixes up words, misconstrues some, and a lot of the logic between a statement, and that's one of my favorite parts about the way he talks and sort of the things he says, is a lot of it sort of feels like this twisted logic of a child where everything kind of fits together, but like one crucial element of maybe basic common sense or logical thinking with regards to whatever he's talking about just isn't there or is totally wrong. So, there you go, right? So I have some example questions here for you. I'm not going to play any clips on here because the show was on HBO, so it was, and also in the UK. In the UK, they don't really censor words. So the vast majority of the show, just letting y'all know, is very explicit. But obviously, mostly from him, not really from the interviewees. They're obviously trying to maintain this sort of level of politeness and decency. But I'll read some of these questions out for you. All right. So this one is to I believe the Secretary General of the United Nations, Boutros Ghali, or former, I'm not sure. Is Disneyland a member of the United Nations? And he doesn't just go there. He continues to ask, why can't Disneyland be a member of the United Nations? And he's like, Disneyland's not a country. Well, some of those characters be getting political. And it just keeps on going. Talking to, I believe, maybe a member of the DEA, member of police, where he's sort of talking about using drugs, sniffing dogs. And he's like, does he use dogs or canines for drug sniffing? Talking to a Christian pastor saying that, well, Christ might have been born in those conditions, no room in the inn, saying that, was he really born in a manger? Asking that. And he's like, well, that's because it was Christmas, isn't it? Obviously, I'm not going to explain the joke to you, but actually I will. I love explaining jokes. The obvious irony of it was the fact that Christmas as a holiday wasn't a thing in December 25th because, he wasn't born yet. Or he just got born. Anyways, this is to Buzz Aldrin. Are you upset that Michael Jackson got all the credit for inventing the moonwalk when he was actually the first geezer to do it? He mixes up Homo sapien with two men liking each other, laughs at an anti-abortion actor saying he's a virgin, which obviously the guy he's going to be proud of that fact, but he's like, what's going on telly, right? And many, many things of that nature. As you can tell, crass, rude a lot of the time. I say at times, but a lot of the time, and sort of attempts to poke fun at the skin of the interviewee. So one example I remember off the top of my head, I don't have this written down, but they were having this sort of panel about schools and teachers and bullying, a lot of stuff, and he asked some pretty crass questions about teacher-student relationships. But another one was talking about bullying, is asking one of the guys, did they ever get bullied? And one of them was like, yeah, he did. And then he just starts making up insults based off of him while he does that, right? It's fairly mean-spirited in nature, obviously. But aside from the character himself, I think the funniest part of these segments of the show is to how every person sort of believes that Ali and the other characters are like real people, and they don't call out their bluff, with a couple of exceptions. And I'm sort of wondering, is that because of the innate politeness that many of these people have, or is it because they're just aware of the ruse and just want to roll with it? I don't know. Obviously, reactions from these interviewees on the show were very, shall we say, varied, right? And some people were were just angry and offended at the fact that they got tricked and sort of the rude nature of the questions they're asking and sort of being mocked. Some people were like, oh, this is pretty funny. And some people during the interview actually seemed to roll along with it and try to explain things. It's kind of funny seeing some of these interviewees where it's like they're actually trying to explain these concepts to a child. I think Buzz Aldrin was one of them, where Ali sort of stumbles upon some dumb thing that he just sort of gets to talk about, like a basic concept of life, or like concept of, like, I guess the Earth, something about like the moon's phases or something like that. And then the tone of voice, it's like he's talking down to a child. It's really interesting. It's fun watching people sort of handle these interesting, stressful, complicated situations and go on with it. All right? It's pretty cool. And it feels like it's high. To me, I think it might, to me, it feels like maybe not highbrow comedy. Highbrow comedy disguises the opposite, or maybe it's just dumb comedy. And I think, my thesis statement with Sacha Baron Cohen and all these characters, because we're not done with just this character, we're going to go with the other ones too, is sort of to cause commotion, make a ruckus, and sort of poke at people in order to get them to reveal their true selves. You sort of disarm them with the nature of your character, which is usually someone who people either look down upon or feel sympathy towards. None of them are super intelligent people. They obviously, sometimes they're all kind of one-note tricks, but they sort of build this sort of extended universe. And I'd say the diverse nature of the three characters sort of allows for different facets of topics to be discussed under different people, under these different characters, in a better way, right? And Ali also has, as I said, a huge sort of tapestry of world building that a lot of it he sort of comes up with on the fly, or at least in order to relate to whatever he's talking about, the person, the sentence even that he's saying. And, we have some information about it. He's apparently part of the West Staines Massive, a gang in his hometown with his friends Dave, otherwise known as Dangerous Dave, which he talks about the man a lot, and Ricky C., and his Julie, the British slang for girlfriend. Also, I believe Rainbow Jeremy, who apparently eschews technology. He doesn't even have a television. And it's true. And this was in a conversation with a bunch of people talking about technology generally. And then also they had a creationist on there, which was a fun little debate, right? I wouldn't say it was a debate, more of a roundtable, but you get the point. And he tells about Dave, like, oh, he doesn't even have television, but he's like, some people just don't even have technology, and then of course the intelligent sort of scholarly people are like, well, everything in your house is made by technology, everything you use is made by some form of technology, or as Ali calls it, technology. He's like, well, you can check it out on his website. And again, I'm thinking about that right now. That's one of those dumb jokes that just sort of slips through the cracks that people either, shall we say, don't acknowledge the people and all that thing, right? Yeah. And I forgot who is this partner. That's Ellie. Forgot about that. Who is this partner? That's my girlfriend. Hey, shout out to you, right? I saw that. I'm a name drop right here on the air. Shout out to you. Shout out. Anyways, back to the show. So, obviously, there's sort of two different eras, and I'm not going to really count the 11 o'clock show because it's mostly just the interviews, and I'm more so talking about them as a form of 11-minute television shows, right? So let's say this, right? The first series on Channel 4 was a much more standard talk show. You can sort of tell the difference between the clips for two reasons if you see them clips. Number one is the aspect ratio. In Britain, it was 16:9, or I guess some sort of widescreen equivalent. I don't know if it was actually fully 16:9. Might have been a little more narrow or wider. I'm not sure. But on HBO, it was 4:3. Also, the quality was a little bit higher. I think the majority of clips are higher. I'm pretty sure they're all available on DVD. I don't think they're available on streaming. I had to get my hands on the DVD myself to sort of get all the episodes and watch them. But yeah, most of the time they're online. And of course, right? Let's see. And of course, it's more of a talk show thing, right? It's also a laugh track. That's the main thing I was slipping up my mind. There was a laugh track, which I personally do not like. And I think the majority of people, I read comments and stuff, they don't really like the laugh track. They think it got better when the HBO show doesn't have a laugh track. It's sort of a more subdued affair. There's no live studio audience. There's no bombastic intros because the whole show it was sort of more segmented, right? You had these bombastic intros with a lot of dancers and sort of this elaborate and sort of crude set design, and him more so dropping one-liners and things like that to the audience. He has like a sidekick DJ. He gets these famous musicians on the air to sort of help remix their song into sort of 90s like jungle drum and bass type of thing. And don't worry, we'll see if we can pull out one of the songs from the movie that you might know. That just gotta check it for guidelines, of course, because it's wrapped in I think it's sort of a Rastafarian. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe that's not the right word, but obviously it's wrapped in a sort of specific dialect. Makes it hard to understand. All right, 1 second. We'll continue in 1 second. Hello? Pardon the interruption. We are back on the air. You are listening to Bass Tunes on KCI 8.9 FM in Irvine, of course. Season 1 and 2, as I said, had the sort of sketch comedy, the sort of live studio audience type of thing, right? Here's the thing, right? The live musicians were pretty cool, I'd say. I think the one I remember the most was Jarvis Cocker of Pulp fame, the sort of Britpop band that was around for however many years on just putting out albums before sort of finally getting their time to shine with His and Hers and Different Class, which is, I consider, people revere that as a really good Britpop album, really snarky, very, again, crude, but very poppy and also very bombastic. It's good, all right? I highly recommend y'all give it a listen if you haven't already. I have it on wax. It's great. But he does a song from the next album, which I think is called This Is Hardcore, and it's called Help the Aged. And then, it's sort of the segment where he just sort of adds a bunch of sound effects and adds drum and bass beats, and then he just sort of steals the show, right? And that's half the time. He's sort of taking up more of the airwaves. But he also does sit-down interviews in front of a live audience on occasion. I think he had the guy who was maybe the president or owner of Harrods, this sort of really big business mogul. I don't recall the name off the top of my head. And a former British politician who was with Scandals. It was a much more British-centric show, of course, because, it was aired in the UK for a British audience. The show, once it moved to the United States, obviously focused on American people, although a bigger mix, I'd say, of things like that. And some segments were sort of reprised. The sort of equivalent to the DEA or sort of, sniffing out illicit substances and all that thing. He had a sort of similar segment with a guy from Britain on there, and it goes pretty funny. Oh yeah, Ali G loves his stuff like that, the stuff that's legal in Cali now, right? And that's another sort of part of his character, right? But yeah, I believe that maybe. Of course, when he moves to HBO, you have the 3 different shows. And it's less of an alley-centric show. And there's less real sort of exposition and explanation for what's going on. It just sort of switches in between the next segment with usually just a random, after like the short introduction where he talks about the topic, just a short random transition scenes of him break dancing against like the bright light background, or just him in a random part of the United States, like Washington or something like that. It was advertised, of course, as this character goes to the United States. And I think he does go to D.C. at some point during the show as well. And then he goes to the United Nations, which I thought was very funny because another funny misconstruing, of course, is him misconstruing the country of Jordan with Michael Jordan, the basketball player. Obviously, he probably likes the NBA. I'm not sure, actually, but, he knows Jordan. A lot of people know Jordan. So after the HBO show, right? Oh, here's the thing. The other characters did get an introduction on the Ali G show in the UK. However, right? Here's the thing, right? He sort of introduces it as, oh, me was looking on telly and looking, I can't really do the accent right now, but he's like, I'm looking on television right now. And he's sort of found this foreign Kazakh news broadcaster. And that's where Borat gets introduced. And it's sort of his show. And I think that one sort of got a bit of a facelift, better quality, different sort of title fonts, and a different theme for the UK version, but there wasn't really a US version, but there really wasn't any explanation, you know? It just sort of switches over to it, and there's nothing. I believe Bruno might have made an appearance on the UK version, but again, it's sort of, he had more of a time to shine in the US version. Now, it's not like every episode of I'm just going to focus on the US version from now on. Not like every episode of that version did have every single character, but usually it had, you know, either Ali and Borat or all three of them, right? I don't think there was ever one where it's just Ali and Bruno. Bruno was sort of the one that was used the least, and in my opinion was the one that was the least developed out of the characters. One, because of timing. Two, I think because of sort of the gimmick behind it wasn't nearly as fully formed and wasn't nearly as... It was a bit more one-dimensional, shall we say, but we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, closing it off for the Ali G segment of the show, and we might end up having to quickly squeeze in the last two. We'll try to get that through as much as we can. I think we'll have less to say about some of the other ones. The movie. Yeah, okay, so y'all knew about the Borat movie, I'm sure. Everyone knows that movie. Everyone can make fun of the character. Very nice. Everyone knows him. Everyone knows it. Everyone thinks it's probably played out. I still think it's hilarious. I don't care. It's like my second favorite movie of all time. I love it. However, Ali got his own movie called Ali G in the House. And it was a very different experience compared to the other two movies because it was the first one in, I believe, 2001 or 2000. And also, it wasn't a hidden camera prank type of thing. The other two movies were him as a character traveling around the United States, pranking people and doing mock interviews, sort of stitching it together with scripted scenes of plot, right? Ali was an entirely scripted, we're not going to make fun of you. We're just going to make a straight comedy movie, right? And obviously there's some satirical elements to it, but it was more so just sort of a raunchy comedy in the veins of, well, any raunchy comedy you could think of. I don't know. Maybe Harold and Kumar? I'm not sure, right? But this is a really interesting movie. Probably one of the most crass movies I've ever seen. I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, wow, this is kind of terrible. The second time I watched it, I was like, okay, this is a lot better than I thought, but it's still pretty dumb. But I still had a good time watching it. And also, I watched it with other people. So I was like, hey, this is way funnier when I'm watching it with someone else next to me. Because me watching it myself, you know, and it's also like, I like showing people my sort of movies and things like that I like. And I liked watching, I was watching Ellie's reaction to it. I was watching her sort of laugh along to it, and it was fun, you know, sort of talking to her about the jokes. It helps you sort of get a grasp of what's going on at the show, you know what I mean? But to quickly summarize the movie, it's essentially a totally scripted satirical comedy. The first part is probably the funniest part because he has this dream where he's in LA and some guy threatens him and the woman, and he sort of does this shootout where he's basically the boss and he wins everything and he's amazing, and then he wakes up in a dream, and then he ends up basically teaching a class for the youth, keeping it real in a sort of civics community center thing in Staines. It's going to get demolished. He's going on strike about it, and he makes a fool of himself. And before we get to the rest of that, let me tell you something real quick. We are at 199.8 watts. That's a lot of watts. Shout out to the watts. Anyways, continuing with that, Ali goes ahead and he ends up running for a member of the parliament in Britain because a sort of associate to the current prime minister of Britain, played by Michael Gambon of all people, Dumbledore. Before we played Dumbledore, of course, this is when the first movie came out, I forgot the other guy's name, but, you know, the first Dumbledore before he passed away, unfortunately, and then Michael Gambon replaced him. Anyways, he wants to steal the prime minister spot. He has his friends, Ricky C, Dangerous Dave. Ricky C is played by Martin Freeman, which everyone knew him as, of course, Tim from The Office, the really sort of nerdy looking, small, bowl cut guy, really quiet, unassuming, average bloke. The sort, that guy, right? Tim from The Office, it's like Jim, but about like 5-10 times less cool, right? He ends up playing Dangerous Dave, and he makes a fool out of himself, and it's amazing. I do think some of the set design for the movie was pretty good. Obviously, he goes into the Prime Minister's office. He has rivalries with other street gang members, and all they do is graffiti, and then Allie gets pantsed. There's a funny little dialogue bit about one of the guys from the Stains guys, right? He's like wearing green, and they all wear, I guess, yellow. I think they're like, "Wait, are you defecting?" And he's like, and obviously, like they're like, intimidating him. And he's like, "Well, me mum mixed me clothes with me brother's like soccer clothing," and they're like, "All right, but tell that woman never to mix clothing together." It's again this sort of weird mix of like the sort of playing a character off and acting super tough and acting like he's coming from the struggle when he's really just in a regular middle class part of Britain. That's the entire point of the character, to make a mockery out of, right? And his name gets revealed too. It's Alistair Leslie Graham. And he lives with his grandma. Like it's like he lives in just a regular part. He just works in a regular part. He's just a sort of low life, just sort of hanging around doing nothing with his life. But hey, he ends up winning in Parliament, and obviously the guy sort of helping Michael Gambon wants him to sort of, because obviously he's an idiot, so he's like, oh, he's just gonna make a mockery of himself, and then he'll have to resign, then I'll take his spot, and then I get to demolish Staines, and then demolish the entirety of the town in order to expand London Heathrow. They ended up destroying Slough in the end, which is pretty funny. Anyways, whole series of stuff ensues. A lot of dumb jokes, a lot of classified material, and sort of shutting up the British Parliament was probably my favorite part of the entire thing, right? But again, it was a dumb comedy. It's not the best dumb comedy I'll ever see, but I mean, if you like the show, just go into the movie knowing that it's not nearly as funny. Well, yes, but also it's not nearly the same. So what do you expect, right? It's a different sort of vibe. Anyways, we're going to move on to Borat now, right? Because I don't think I'm going to end up playing any music so I can get it. I was going to play 3 tracks during it for each song, but I decided in this case, we're just going to keep talking because I want to get through all this, right? Obviously, he's the character everyone knows. I'll spend the least amount of time on him, probably. Foreign reporter from Kazakhstan, right? Obviously, he sort of acts like Kazakhstan is this backwards third world country, more of a Eastern Europe, Romania type of thing. It's not. It's not. It's a really big country, too. It's a cool place. And honestly, I think that was the perfect country to pick. A very intelligent choice, because how many people could see that on the map, know a country that is, especially like American or British people, how many people that, and I know maybe I'm just calling myself out as being ignorant, which I can be ignorant. I can be very ignorant. Never say that you're not ignorant. Remember that. Everyone thinks that they're smarter than they really are. Right? But most people don't know where that is, so they can sort of rope him into this sort of stereotyped Eastern European foreigner, funny jokes, things like that. And the whole point is him just sort of learning about British and then American customs, right? And of course, making crass jokes about his wife and treating the fair sex and treating different groups of people, that sort of stuff. You get the deal. But of course, again, it's comedic because one, sometimes he gets these people to sort of let loose their true colors, or maybe just say something that maybe they might not naturally say, or as some people might think, showing their true colors if they're like hateful or something like that, which is expanded upon in the movie too. But obviously, he's sort of focusing on regular people more so. And it's less making dumb jokes and interviewing people. It's more so him putting himself into like situations. Let's say he goes door to door canvassing with a politician, or he goes to this sort of, I forgot what it was, sort of farm reenactment thing from like the 1800s, or learns how to play soccer or football and doesn't know what he's doing. Goes to the beach and interviews people. Things like that. Sort of interviewing people, learning about the customs and, again, making a mockery of himself and building an even larger sort of tapestry about his universe. His brothers, his cousins, Johnny the Monkey, things like that. All these sort of characters and places. It's more world building. The accent is the most emulatable. He's the most emulatable. He's probably the kindest to sort of look at. He's, especially in the show compared to the movie, he's very, shall we say, meek. He's very awkward. English, he doesn't have as much of a apparent grasp of the language, sort of stuttering, having a slower time putting sentences together. It's sort of the same thing, you know what I mean? He's sort of, it's a much more meek portrayal. You sort of feel more for him than you do in the movie, because in the movie, I feel like his character was sort of ramped up to 11, especially because of the more scripted segments. And talking about the movie, of course, yeah, everyone knows the movie. I'm not going to delve too much into it. It had a massive, massive box office, great reviews, a very explicit movie, but a very funny one at that. And, of course, has him sort of traveling across America, US and A. Couple of funny, interesting tidbits, though, of course, right? I mean, how do you get people to film? Well, gets people to sign release. That's how he ends up getting people to agree to this stuff, especially in the movie, where they're sort of agreeing to, hey, listen, he's this guy from a different country. We're just sort of helping him out. He wants to learn about American customs, and you're just going to see it in the foreign country of Kazakhstan that these people probably couldn't even put on a map. And honestly, until I saw the movie, I didn't really remember that country. I didn't know where it was on the map, but I think I remember the shape. It's a pretty big country. And obviously, they get them to sign a release form, shell company, all that. He's in character the entire time. He's not putting on a character and then just like cameras cut. The second he leaves the hotel room till the end of the day, even when he's talking to the director and his co-star and crew and all that, he's still in character, which I heard was pretty funny. Him sort of getting to heated arguments about how they want to do a scene while he's talking in the funny accent, right? All that stuff. The chair sketch is still my favorite one. That's not the King of the Castle. It's the... I'm just going to throw this one out real quick, and then we can move on to the last episode, the sort of last character, which I might have the most or least to say about. We'll find out, right? So this is from the Allergy Show, right? I'm just going to do a stupid impression of it because I think it's funny, right? So he's on a dating advice. He's on sort of a dating help program. He wants to learn about this stuff, and he's talking to a lady. And he's like, can I tell joke? And he's like, yes. And he's like, there's a chair, and the chair walks with the shoe. He goes, la 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 la. It's one of those. I love that joke. It might be one of my favorite jokes in the entire series because it's not even a joke. There's no setup or punchline. It's all in your head. Half of it is just the fact that he's smiling and laughing about it and seeing the reaction from the lady. I feel like there's levels to it. Because obviously, you think about the image. I'm thinking about the chair that I'm sitting on right now in studio. And imagine if not even that. Like, imagine if I had like a lazy boy chair or something like that. And it just starts walking on shoes. Woo-doo-doo-doo-doo. That's funny, isn't it? But it gets even funnier because of the delivery. So that's pro tip. It's not just the jokes. But obviously, everyone knows the funny scenes. Everyone's seen the funny clips. Great movie. There was also a sequel, which I didn't watch when it came out because it was about the 2020 election and the pandemic. And I was like, hey, you know what? I'm not really in the mood to talk about this stuff because I have been just cooped up in my house playing games on my computer and feeling pretty down. My dad watched it and he thought it was good, and I ended up watching it 2 years later, and I thought it was pretty good, right? Obviously, you can't top a sequel, but I think they did it in a really interesting way. Because one, obviously everyone knows who the character is. He wouldn't have brought it back if he wanted to sway some influence on the 2020 election to get Biden in office. I'm pretty sure that was it. Did the movie help? I mean, he's in office, so maybe. I don't know, right? But it doesn't really star him as much because of how popular he is, and they sort of play into that in the beginning of the movie. Sort of the movie did do well in the world, and the country got mad at him, so they have to send him back for something, and they go with the 2020 election. Important figures in a certain administration, vice presidents, things like that, making fun of people, doing hidden camera pranks, all that stuff. And him I thought that part was fake, but the part where he sort of hangs out with, after the lockdown hits and he has to stay in with just some random, I believe like Southerner guy who was pretty nice but kind of strange, a little crass and all that stuff. But it was a cool little thing, right? I thought that part was fake. I was like, how could they even believe it? But yeah. Another woman ends up acting as his daughter, Maria Bakalova, as Tuta, and she steals the show, right? She's the one who has really good comedic chops and is a really good playing off of Cohen, and 2, really good on her own. So she steals the show and ends up being kind of a heartfelt story about family in the sense. It was a much more heartfelt story. Both of them, of course, were sort of movies with stories that were segmented between sketches. I felt like the story had more of an importance in the second one. I'm not sure. Obviously didn't get as big of a release because it was on streaming only, right? Obviously because you couldn't really go to theaters, and also they picked it up on Prime. I feel like it was shot... it seemed like it was maybe lower budget, but also looking at some reports seemed like it had a higher budget. Both of them were in like the tens of millions of figures, so not super high for a budget movie, obviously, because it was mostly just camera stuff and legal stuff, but obviously, it's still a lot of money, right? It's like how much the FNAF movie's going to cost, and that one's got like sets and robots. Super hyped for that, by the way. But yeah, I thought the movie was good. All right. To close it off, let's talk about Bruno. And I'm mostly going to focus on the movie here because, one, it's the one I hadn't ended up seeing because I saw it years ago. I saw it before this. I saw the show before this. All that stuff. I didn't see Bruno until recently. I don't know why. I just didn't really have an interest in it. My parents loved Borat. They didn't really have much to say about Bruno. I thought it was, I didn't like it as much. And that's sort of how that's how a lot of people felt. It didn't gross as much. It wasn't as, people didn't like it as much. And part of me was like, well, is it because of the fact that he's playing a gay character? And it's like, that sort of stuff. And I'm like, no. Actually, maybe a little, right? That might be part of it, especially because it came out in 2009. We weren't as accepting of LGBTQ culture and that sort of thing as much before that, around that time, compared to, let's say, nowadays or maybe a few years ago. I don't know. I might be going down now. I don't know, man. It's crazy out here. But, right, to me, I felt like a few things about Bruno. All right. Number one, I think the character itself, and I did hear a reviewer, Your Movie Sucks, say this, Adam of YMS, so thank you. I don't think you're ever going to hear this, but thank you. I love your videos. He said one of the reasons was, of course, he wasn't as emulatable, right? One, because, it's a less comedic character. Two, I don't think as many random people wanted to emulate an extremely, flamboyant and annoying character. Not only the fact that, one, I don't know how many people, probably people go, oh, I don't want to, play a gay character if they're, not gay, right? A lot of people don't really feel comfortable with that. The other thing is this, right? The character was just a lot more annoying to be around. He was just a frankly annoying character to be around, right? And his tone was more condescending. But yeah, he was more eccentric, more flamboyant in every single aspect of his, from his wardrobe to his personality. The whole point of the movie is to him try to become famous, right? Whereas Borat's like, oh, let's report, and then I'm gonna go get the girl, which ends up being Pamela Anderson, who was actually one of the only people in on the movie. Same with Bruno. The whole point is that he ends up, it's sort of a love story, kind of, with his assistant Lutz, but it's like a sort of weird, love triangle thing and all that. But it sort of becomes, how far am I willing to go to become famous? He ends up tricking and trolling some more people. He trolls Ron Paul, which I thought was really funny. And, there's a similar scene in the second Borat film with that and Giuliani. But, well, the tables are turned in that one. This time Bruno's the one trying to trick Ron Paul, right? And that part was pretty funny. I think my favorite part of that movie, was at some point he ends up trying to make a movie. He ends up trying to make a TV show to air on the network, on some network, right? And he hosts a focus group. He has this sort of talent agent who apparently was never in on it until he saw a billboard, and then he saw the MTV Awards and then realized, oh, wait, I was duped the entire time. And he was a pretty cool guy, heavy Southern accent, pretty nice guy, especially dealing with the absurdity of that character. But Well, the focus group he ends up sitting a bunch of, I don't know if it's like Midwestern people or just people from LA. It might have been LA or something like that. Just average middle class, just regular people, right? And then you just have this hard style drum and bass, gabber, this super heavy rave music, camera shots, flashing lights, celebrity, the character dancing and scanning cloud outfits, zooming and things like that. And he has this pretty. I'm not going to say the segments, but in that section, there was a lot of crass segments. The Harrison Ford interview was pretty funny. Just look up Harrison Ford interview, Bruno, and you will see what I'm talking about. And the whole thing, you can't even see the uncensored one on YouTube because of a certain ending of it. But it just keeps on ramping up and it gets more and more outlandish. And that's the thing. It was probably more gratuitous. And some people I've talked to disagree with this. They disagree with this wholeheartedly. But I frankly do think that Bruno was way farther than Borat. Someone I knew disagreed with me on this, but I do think it went way farther. One, in the sort of nudity section, right? It was a pretty hard R. It's a very, very hard R rating. I don't even know how it got an R rating, but it did get an R rating, so there you go, right? Two, I think he puts himself in some more danger, I think, right? There's an ending where, okay, long story short, he ends up trying to like be converted out of his sexuality, which in order to become well known, right, and become famous. Plays a fake wrestling character called Straight Dave. Ends up reuniting with his assistant, turned love interest, in this sort of boxing match or wrestling match, and you know they sort of coalesce their love, you know, as far as they can without breaking laws in terms of inciting a riot and things like that. And it all goes down really badly. So he was in danger there. And he also goes to he goes to Israel and he sits down like some sort of spokesperson or government official from Israel and Palestine, has them sit down together, and he's like, I need to solve a world issue to become famous. And it's funny too, because they actually kind of can agree on like two things. One, hummus tastes good. And two, this guy is super annoying. So he got them to agree on two things. So hey, a lot more celebrity cameos in this one too. You have like Snoop Dogg, Chris Martin of Coldplay, I think Bono at the end for this sort of song that they have record. They go on a talk show that's sort of staged, sort of not staged. That he adopts like an immigrant baby, and it's outlandish, it's crass, and it's really funny. But it's one of those more movies where I'm like, wow, this is very explicit. And I was also watching it. I was like, I'm not really in the mood to see gratuitous display of the human body right at the moment when I saw it. But some of those clips are really funny, and it still did pretty well. So obviously, you know, I think about it more, and I thought about this, and I was going to talk about this more, but I saw this comment on YouTube. I'll sort of close off with this. I saw this comment, and it was the fact that it was the theater of cruelty. And it was sort of this assault on the eyes and ears and senses. And I feel like that focus group scene, especially for the audience members, like the people watching it, but also the people in real life, the actual theater goers, a lot of it. You know, Roger Ebert was like, I was laughed, I was appalled, I was disgusted, I was amazed. I felt a lot of emotions watching that movie, and it was crazy. I think that also might be due to the fact that was my first time seeing it, and I didn't know what was going to happen. I felt that way when I saw Borat for the first time. I saw the certain hotel scene where they go into the conference room and they're fighting. I was on an airplane with my father laughing at that. We were watching it, you know? I was maybe a little too young to watch it, but I was young enough. I somehow, you know, I watched a lot of shows that I probably shouldn't have for my age. I watched South Park and stuff when I was like 7. Really shouldn't have done that, but I turned out okay, as I said. I've said this before on the air. But, right, this one I somehow got shielded from until I was like an early teenager. So, hey, you know what? Shout out to my pops for that. Okay. Whew. In conclusion, after a lot of summary and analysis and thoughts about that, I don't know how much of it. these three characters sort of resemble a very similar sort of brand of prank, sketch, hidden camera, sort of poking fun at real life people and playing these dumb characters and building the sort of world about it and taking it across the country. And obviously they weren't the first people to do it. He wasn't the last person to do it, that sort of thing. But I think he's one of the people who did it best. And obviously, I mean, one of my favorite TV shows of all time is Eric Andre. It was number 2. I think Ali G is now number 2. Number 1 being King of the Hill. Shout out to that show all day and every day. But I feel like Eric Andre took a lot of influence with his Man on the Street segments. You had Johnny Knoxville, Bad Grandpa doing that sort of thing, although I didn't think it was as funny. You had a lot of people, as I said, before and after that I just can't remember off the top of my head right now, do this sort of live camera thing. And it was great, And it's not that often that a movie comes out and becomes this huge cultural phenomenon. I guess we're kind of having one right now with Barbie and Oppenheimer, but at the same time, I think part of that is not really the characters exactly. It was more of the event of it. I haven't seen either of those movies, by the way, and I don't know which one I'm going to watch first. I'm not going to watch them back to back. I'll remember, we're going to go do Barbenheimer. I'm like, no, dude. Oppenheimer was like a 3-hour drama about ethics and morality and death. And Barbie's a movie about Barbies that also apparently talks about some darker topics when they become aware of something. I don't know. I read some summary of it. I don't remember all of it. I'm not going to spoil it on the air. The Barbie movie, which apparently is pretty good, actually. It's pretty good, actually. I haven't seen it. I was just going to watch it because people wanted to watch it. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, if other people want to watch it with me, sure. But, I mean, it looks more interesting to me, right? So maybe I'll take a look at it. I'm more interested in watching it now. Also, another thing I might talk about next week, I might think about it. Travis Scott put out an album. I didn't even realize. I don't know if it was scheduled for today or, Friday, Thursday at 9 p.m. or maybe even Friday at midnight. I don't remember if he released it in that time or not. But, I mean, he put out a new album, Utopia. I heard half of it. I intently listened to about 4 of the songs, and the rest of them I was doing some work on the script and work on my homework, so I wasn't paying as much attention to it, sadly. But, obviously, I mean, I might talk about that. I was highly considering even just cutting this episode off and saying, let's talk about Utopia today, but I didn't end up finishing the album. I didn't end up having enough time to collect my thoughts, and I was like, well, do I want to do some stuff for some clout, even though it's you're tuning into the station to hear some alternative stuff, Obviously, hearing album reviews, things like that. I've reviewed some modern hits before. I mean, I've reviewed 72 Seasons. I can review anything old or new. I can talk about anything old or new because I like having that sort of variety on the air, but I mean, I love this show with all my heart. I love the movies. I think they're some of my favorite pieces of media work ever. I think they scratch all my itches. It's funny in a dumb way, and it's also funny in a smart, satirical way. I love things that mesh together the smart and the stupid. That is my comfort zone. I love acting bombastic and fun when I get the chance, and I also like to think intently about things and read and learn and become educated and try to strengthen my brain. I love both of them. That is, to me, the key. I live in maybe not in a balanced world in terms of everything I do. I could do less stuff and do some more stuff that I probably should, but I love things that sort of pit the two together. I like dumb things made by smart people, and I think I want to try and do that. I mean, I don't know how smart of a guy I am, but I consider myself at least fairly intelligent, So, hey. I think that's about it for today's episode of Bass Tunes, KUCI 88.9 FM in Irvine. If you would like to check out more of my content, please do. Please check me out on YouTube. Not YouTube exactly, although you can find that on my Instagram. And I'll tell you where to find it, all right? That is BasedTunesKUCI, all right? That is Bass Tunes KUCI on Instagram. I didn't end up streaming this one, so you wouldn't have seen it there, but I do intend to get this episode up on an archival platform, probably YouTube or something like that, fairly soon. And we've had my interview is up there with Morris. We have some of my older content. I haven't uploaded all the stuff I've recorded. I probably won't. But this episode I'm fairly proud of, and I think I didn't script it out as heavy as I should. After most of the Ali G thing, I was winging it off the top of my head. So, if you could tell that, then hey, you're smart. If you couldn't tell, well, that's a compliment to me, so thank you. I like speaking off the cuff, that. I'm getting better at the whole outlining thing, but, run off the top of my head. I hope you guys are staying cool in this weather because it has been very hot. It was kind of funny because I checked my weather app before I was about to go outside and walk my dog before I left to go, get some coffee, get some food, and get to the station. I was like, wow, it's not that hot because it was cloudy. It was kind of windy. And then right as soon as I brought Janie back and I left the house again after like maybe 30 minutes, I was like, wow, this is actually pretty hot. So, hey, we're having one of the hottest weeks in recorded history. Shout out to climate change, right? Shout out to that. Sarcasm. Do not shout out to that. That's a terrible thing, of course. Hope you guys stay cool. Hope you guys also maybe conserve on electricity and air conditioning if you can. I haven't really been doing that, unfortunately. But, hey, do what you can. Help out the environment, And also just do what you can, Try to stay cool in this weather. I mean, we're in Orange County. Go to the beaches, man. I'm sure they're packed. I haven't gone to the beach in a while. You should go to the beach, right? And I hope that everybody is also just having a great week in general. Last week, too. I hope y'all had a great week on the air, off the air. And if you're listening currently, thank you so much for listening. I love this show. I love doing what I love to do. And it pained me so much to do this, to have to skip this episode last week. And I'm super glad that I could do this on the air and talk to you, the listener, and anybody, online, offline, live, archived, whatever you want. I'm here and I'm based and we're keeping it real. All right. In terms of next week's content, I'm not too certain yet. Maybe Utopia, maybe something else. Right. But again, for the last time, if you want to find out what's up next week, BasedTunesKuci on Instagram. Yes. Yeah. All right. Well, let's see here. I'm going to play a little filler. I might pop back in real quick and play one of the songs from the show, but yeah, I don't know, right? I think that's actually it. I don't feel like playing any music. If I do pop back in and say something, I'll let you know, but in that case, that's it for today's episode of Base Tunes, KUCI 8.9 FM in Irvine. I've been Aryan Salimi. Stay based, everybody. And all right, partner. Keep on rolling, baby. You know what time it is. It's Fred Durst Friday. BOOYAKASHA. Had to hit y'all with it for the one time. Happy Base Day, Fred Durst Friday, all that. It's been a great 20th birthday week. Bye.